Welcome back, everybody, for our next panel hosted by DW on connecting the dots, regionalization versus globalization. I'm pleased to welcome Ameyo, Mira, and Fisayo and as speakers, and this panel will be moderated by Tamima. Over to you, Tamima. You're on mute.
Thank you, Shana. So again, thank you for everyone who's joining us for this particular panel. And we're going to kick off. We are going to be delving into the debate of regionalization versus globalization. So I'm going to ask each of my panelists to take a few moments just to introduce themselves and to give us a brief background around what they do. So I'm going to start with you, Mira.
Yeah, I'm an editor at DW, that's the international broadcaster from Germany. I've been with DW since 2017. I currently mostly work for the science and health department. I have a strong focus in health topics when it comes to my journalistic work and my journalistic background. But for the last 3 years, I've also worked as social media video producer and content creator for our DW News platforms, and I've tried various formats when it comes to video storytelling. So I have a strong focus in video when it comes to the content I do.
Thank you, Mira. Over to you, Ameyo.
Hi everyone, my name is Amir Debra. I am the founder of Amir Debra Media. I am a blogger. I do entertainment and lifestyle primarily, and it started a few years ago when I worked with different publishing companies, and then eventually in 2008 I launched amirdebra.com, and since then we've grown from strength to strength to become an all-round content creator, creating videos, doing social media influencing for organizations, for brands, etc. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, and finally, Fisayo.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Fisayo Fusudo. I specialize in making reviews online. I'm a video producer. I make videos about smartphones, apps, accessories, and I host a series called the Finance Friday series, where I talk about personal finance, the Nigerian economy, business, and anything that has to do with finance every Friday. And I have that on YouTube, and I use social media to share my message.
Okay, super. So I think on here we have Ghana, we have Nigeria, we have Germany, and it's interesting to say that we are all coming from different corners of the world. So a very great setting for the discussion that we're about to have, which is regionalization versus globalization. So how do you think this affects content and specifically the media industry? Let's start with you, Mira.
Yeah, I mean, for an international broadcaster like DW, regionalization, globalization, this is obviously not a new topic. We've been struggling with that dynamic for a very long time now, and we have, taken different approaches of tackling it. I mean, I don't know if everyone is aware, but when it comes to our online content in DW, we have around 30 languages. There's always sometimes 2 languages more or less. Every year it changes, but around 30 languages. And often when it comes to our news content, we have our core news producers or news writers in German and English. And then these up to 30 languages, they adopt the content, meaning they don't simply translate it, but they make it accessible for their audience because they come from the regions, they know the audience, and they know what's going to be interested for the audiences. So we've been doing this for a long time, but we obviously see now more of a change that the audience also requests, and that's something that happens with the social media and so on, that we interact with them more and that it becomes even more regionalized. But at the end of the day, we're such a huge broadcast, so we have to make decisions. We cannot satisfy everyone. That's obviously clear. So we try to bring more people on the ground. So we've been trying to expand our network of correspondents quite a bit, and we see that makes a big impact. Yeah.
And Ameo, how does this affect you as a digital influencer and content creator?
Well, for me, right from the start, it has always been at the back of my mind to do something that is local but could be accepted globally. And so I present what I do primarily first to my Ghanaian audience, then African audience, and then it also then connects with the diaspora. So I when it comes to the way I present it, even in terms of the language, I don't limit myself to just our local languages, but I treat the subject in a local manner, but in a way that has that appeal. So it's able to travel regionally and then even globally. So for me, it's very, very important, especially when you find yourself in the digital space, in the online space. You wouldn't know who is going to interact immediately with your content. So you should present it in a way that the person falls in love with it and perhaps will move from that content to now becoming a community member and add up to your community as well. So for me, that has been my model.
Okay. And for you, Fisayo?
Yeah, this is a very interesting one for me because I tend to look at the analytics for people who view the things I make online a lot. And when I see it, it's interesting to note that from the region where I'm from, which is in the Nigerian West African area, I have around like 30 to 40% of people that watch, whether I'm making a tech video or a finance video, and then the 60% is scattered all around the world. And that is, including the US, India, and, diverse places that I would probably not have expected, the things I'm creating to reach. So what I'm just trying to say is, there's definitely pros and cons to globalization and also regionalization as well. There are pros and cons to each of them. And I look forward to like all the discussions we're going to be having today on these two topics.
Okay, so as we're talking about regionalization versus globalization, maybe to you, Mira, what do you think is the extent and the impact of digital influencers today?
I think it's undeniable that they have a growing influence, and I also just recently had a chat with someone from our distribution department, especially for the African continent, and we see there that often, especially the younger audiences, have like a different kind of trust towards influencers compared to the big old school media broadcasters. This is obviously a challenge for us that we have to tackle, but it's like undeniable also when we look at platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, that the ones who are doing really, really well there are often influencers or content creators. And unfortunately, often the big broadcasting stations try to catch up a little bit. We always feel like we're chasing the influencers in the sense of what can we do that will speak to the younger audiences, because we have to admit that there's currently a process that we shift from the old school way of reaching our target audience, for example, through TV or radio, and that the younger audiences will be more on different kind of digital platforms, OTT platforms, and so on. So we're trying to move there to not die out with the old audience.
So to you, Ameo, now as a digital content creator and influencer, what would you think is your biggest impact? You're muted, please unmute.
So for me, the impact comes on a number of levels. Sometimes you create content and then it travels very far and wide. People respond to it in ways you didn't even think it would happen. But when people reach out to me in email, in DMs, that they've seen something has happened, they want to confirm it with me, whether it's true, it makes me feel that at least I have a voice that these people believe, and they want to cross-check with me before they confirm that something is true. So that is one of those personal highlights for me. But the impact, it's been amazing, because sometimes as a content creator, you sort of have in mind what you're creating and what you think your audience may be. But every now and then you create the content and you see that it is moving into different spaces from what you initially thought it would. And it gets exciting. I've had a lot of amazing experiences like that. I'm happy when my content is picked up by international media companies and they are able to use it in whatever form that they want to. And for me, it makes me feel that I'm adding to global conversations around these very specific subjects also.
Okay, and finally to you, Fisari, what do you believe is the impact that we're seeing digital content creators and influencers having currently?
Yeah, I think the impact is, like Amir said, it's present, and it's, I mean, you can't really understate it. And as someone myself who's a digital creator, I'm kind of lucky to be in this space. And for my region, I was kind of lucky to start early making technology content and speaking to the Nigerian audience about it. And from what I realized, it was more like, these guys they weren't getting this value, which is the kind of content I'm making. They weren't getting that value, and my only mission was to give them that value. So yeah, I think the impact is very present, and I'll just end on that note.
Okay. I'm seeing Annette is attempting to join us, so we'll just give her a bit more time to settle in. So Mira, I'm curious, obviously we know right now we are living in a very global and digital world. So what do you believe is the current importance of influencers that we are seeing in the media landscape? And also, what does this mean ultimately to the profession that is journalism?
I will be very bold and say, like, they're not going to steal our jobs. I think journalism, and especially independent, high quality journalism, is still very, very important. And I think we've seen that also over the last few months and years during this pandemic, that we've actually kind of profited from the pandemic, in the sense of that a lot of people have come back to us because they saw that we had consistent high quality information on what's going on during the pandemic worldwide, and people really appreciated that. And it was not so much then about that you would rather go to your favorite influencer for that kind of information. And currently in Europe, we're seeing the same dynamic during the war in Ukraine, that people really come to us because they know that DW will deliver high quality information what's going on, and that we have journalists on the ground who work with a certain work ethic, and therefore we can assure that the information really is reliable. So I think content creators and influencers will not take over that space completely, but obviously there is also a chance for us as broadcasters to use collaborations with influencers to get a different kind of audience that we've maybe so far have not been able to reach.
Okay, so Amaya, I'm curious now, on the other side, as the influencer, what do you believe your impact will be now to the profession that is journalism?
Well, I think there would never be a time that one takes over the other. And I think it's important that people in journalism also build themselves in these spaces such a way that their authority, their influence is equally felt. So a DW presenter, for instance, can continue his influence off the screen and create that personality on social media, where again, he or she is doing his journalism work, but is influencing or impacting on the online community in such a way that people always come to you for the real stuff. So I think most of the time we see that sort of divide, but we really shouldn't see it as such. We are all in it, and we should contribute to the ecosystem. But if you should leave influencers on their way and treat them like they are on their own and they're so different from everything else, I think that is where the issues are. The American networks do it very well. They are presenters, they put their handles out all the time. They make sure that they don't lose out in that social media craze, digital space. So I think it's important that because we need each other. When it comes, especially when it comes to dissemination of information, traditional media is set up properly. They have more resources, they have more access. So we need to benefit from that within the digital space. So that's what I'll say to that.
Okay. So obviously regional cooperation is a good preparation for globalization. So how has this form of cooperation enabled regional platforms to be international competitive? And obviously looking at your model as DW, Mira earlier only mentioned that you're currently dealing in almost 28 plus languages. So if you were to contextualize that now in terms of how the various regions that are part of your network are cooperating, and then how that now ultimately builds on up into the global business that is DW.
I mean, we see, and for a long time, I think we've only fought one direction in DW, and that's maybe a little bit goes almost into the, that we have the mothership that is in Germany, and from there we're sending out into the world and we're delivering the messages or the information or whatever. Now I think we've kind of switched our mentality a little bit and seen the high potential that we have with all those languages, with all those people on the ground, with expanding our network of correspondence, and it becomes more like a two-way path where we also bring the information and the knowledge from the ground back to our headquarters, so to say. And then when it comes, for example, I work in science and health, and obviously that's a bit more of a universal, topic, language but we profit so much when we get feedback from the ground, also from our network in all those different languages, what the people are interested in and what is really what moves the people, and very often that's something we are unable, even if we're making an effort, we're unable to really grasp from the headquarters, and we really need the people on the ground to give us the input and to be able to talk to people on the streets. And that's where I see is we've really made progress.
Okay, so I'm seeing Annette has just joined us. Annette, can you hear me? Please unmute.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, super. So maybe just give us a brief introduction of yourself and what it is that you do.
I'm a media personality in Uganda. I began early enough in 2010 hosting a university show, entertainment. I'm so much based into the entertainment sector. So gradually I grew. Now I am part of the Uganda Bulletin that airs every 7:30 p.m. in the evening, but also hosting a morning show, a daily morning show on one of our TV stations called Sanyuka TV.
Okay, so having just joined us, maybe you can give us your opinion. What do you think is the relevance of digital influencers in today's world? And at the same time, how do you see this now ultimately affecting traditional journalism?
I didn't get you very well.
What do you believe is the impact of digital influencers today? And also, how do you see this affecting journalism overall?
The influence is really big. When you come back here in East Africa, Uganda to be particular, they are taking over what we used to term as airtime, TV airtime, where most of the brand owners want to associate more with them because they get quick impact, they get quick feedback, and they have a lot of authority. You find that one person has 9 million plus people following them. And these are people who are believing in what she is selling them, good or bad. They will buy whatever she's selling to them or he is selling to them. But it's as well very, very good for more so the traditional journalism, like TV, because it had laid back. We used to have the same advert, same concept, same everything running over and over again. When you look at digital influencers, there's a way their content is more relatable to the people. They're more creative. They're giving them a run for their money because they are too creative. And of course, they put in a lot of organic work, which people easily relate with. So it's something that is really good, but also it's putting up a very big challenge for those in traditional media, because for our journalists, people like me are starting to cope up with social media simply because they feel left out. They are challenged by these young people who are influencing on social small platforms to do something for themselves. They also want to break their stories and break them right.
Okay, thank you, Annette. So maybe to you, Fisai, because as we are talking about regionalization, have you had opportunities where you collaborated with other content creators and influencers and even media platforms within the region that you're in?
Yes.
Sorry,
okay.
The question is for Fisai.
Okay.
Sure. This is a very good question because I have in fact collaborated with DW here. And I would love to agree with the idea that Ameyo gave, which is that journalists and influencers should collaborate. If you look at it, there's the conundrum that, okay, journalists have the onus to be unbiased. They have to speak the truth at all times. And journalists have to, get a degree and, just further their career and stick to this very, very strict routine. However, if you look at influencers, we can, anybody that's an influencer, anybody can, not necessarily anyone can be, there's a lot of hard work. As somebody that people would refer to me as an influencer, as someone who is a video creator, I post content every week. I work with brands, I do all of this other stuff. I think there should be like a middle ground, or there should be that middle ground where both parties can meet and then explore each other's worlds. So that's journalists taking on more social media presence, and that's influencers now having more standardized styles, or just having a little bit of accreditation here and there that can just help everything sort of tie together. Because in the end, it's information, and personally, for me, it's education. I just like to teach people stuff and just help people get more value. And the world would be a better place if everyone is putting value first.
Okay. So Mira, as we're talking about globalization and content, so in the wake of media convergence, because now we're talking about media, we're talking about digital, we're talking about OTT services. So what do you believe is the role of news agencies within the globalization landscape, and also in terms of setting what ideally can be termed as a global agenda?
I mean, I do see that the news agencies still play a very important role, especially also for us as an international broadcaster. We still heavily rely on news agencies and the information or the footage that they provide for us. But really, we've seen within the last few years that it makes such a huge difference if we have also our own people on the ground, and that's what has also the world of social media opened up for us, is the path that we now use obviously a lot of user-generated content also, or we try to get in touch if a certain news event breaks on the ground. And I think a lot of our audiences that really value that they can get a different perspective than maybe the mainstream perspective that the news agencies would provide you. And I think we've also seen that we often get sometimes more maybe smaller stories, more regional stories, but more interesting, more personal stories. If we make use of the user-generated content, we might come across I'm thinking about like protests that have been happening in the last few years, and maybe some personal stories related to that protest, and then people becoming icons online of a certain movement. And I think that would have been impossible without social media and people on the ground, in addition to obviously the news agencies that are still relevant.
Okay. So obviously, when we are talking about globalization versus regionalization, there's always a debate. So is globalization a friend or foe of cultural diversity and intercultural dialogue? And obviously now thinking about the kind of influences that big news outlets currently have. So with that in context, and let me start with Ameyo. Do you believe that globalization is a friend of war or cultural diversity, and putting that into the African context?
Well, I think we all agree that globalization has a lot of benefits, and it's important for players such as ourselves when we are creating content and having conversations that would go on the global stage. It's important that we are culturally correct and we don't let go our culture just so that we fit in or for it to get global. I'm using, for instance, Netflix does Squid Games, a Korean thing. It starts small, it goes global. Recently, young rich Africans from Africa is also doing amazing on Twitter. At least is doing amazing on Netflix. At least on the regional level, you see Africans discussing it. And when you look at it, somebody will say, a woman being happy to be a gold digger is not our culture. And this person is embracing it. But in reality, that is someone's truth. So it shows you that culturally who we are also dynamic and we are evolving. And for me, when we are having that discussion to take our content out there, it's important that we are true to ourselves. We shouldn't lose our culture and we shouldn't assimilate too much of the foreign culture so that even when it's too assimilated, you don't have something new to tell the world because you are bringing them what's theirs anyway. So I think it's important that creators as ourselves, we make that conscious effort to sell our culture. And even if we cannot sell it fully, we should find creative ways of putting them in there, and we shouldn't over-assimilate from out there.
Okay, Alex, I'm curious about your views. So as we are all racing towards having this global appeal, how do we make sure that at the same time we don't eliminate the authentic local identity?
I didn't get you.
So as we are all racing to have this global appeal, so how, in your opinion, what do you believe is one of the best ways to make sure that at the same time local authenticity is maintained?
It's something really hard, extremely hard. More so here in Uganda, you find that people love more to affiliate with the Western cultures compared to our culture, because we find that most of the things that we believe in as Africans are referred to as traditional and rigid, which is not what's selling apparently. I've had very many debates between artists and people in the entertainment industry arguing. Some say, the elders say they dress skimpily while presenting, performing for their audiences. But at the same time, these girls are asking, what should we do? Because this is what the audience wants. How come you don't complain about Beyonce? Whenever she comes in a portrait on stage, you're always chanting and then it's okay. And then we had this Chris Rock, Will Smith incident. In my culture, it creates something really bad. How do people come out and fight on such a big audience? Oh my God, we've lost sanity. But in that case, I don't know how they took it. And trust me, by the end of this year, it's going to be one of the biggest pranks somewhere, one of the biggest shows in Uganda or East Africa, time to come. So it's good, but I think the stakeholders have a lot to do to remind people, like he has said, the previous presenter, about the originality of their cultures and what they have to do, and also to strike a balance, because we have those cultural things that have been put upon us for a very long time, like female circumcision. I come from Uganda, and part of Eastern Uganda, there's a tribe called Sebei, where it's normal to have female genital circumcision. So when the globalization comes on board, we see so many disadvantages about this. but at the same time, we have people who are still rigid doing it. We don't want to lose ourselves, but at the same time, we do not want to really be scrutinized, or as women, as Africans, as young, most of the young women in Africa. So there's a lot that has to be done by the stakeholders, that is the content creators, on what to show that is right and what's not right, and also the governments in the different countries, the stakeholders, and different religious leaders, plus the different stakeholders.
Okay. So, Fisayo, to you, because now some very interesting viewpoints right there. And obviously, we are talking about regionalization versus globalization. So, there are those who say that, you know what, it has to be global first, then it will work regional. Because if you're regional, you risk not being relevant on the global stage. So, I'm curious, in your opinion, what is the best way to make sure that, especially for us now as Africans, that we are able then to export our content, which is authentically us, as authentically African and local, now to other parts of the world?
This is a very interesting question, because I just recently did an interview with a couple of people, filmmakers, the owner of one of the biggest cinemas in Nigeria. And he was mentioning the fact that African stories aren't being told enough. And, that the stories are not necessarily, even if they are told, they're not necessarily represented well. And I think what we have to actually pay attention to, what is original about the African stories, and, the things that we want to actually say. We have to pay attention to all of these things, and then see how best we can broadcast it. In terms of globalization or regionalization first, I think it depends on what it is that what it is that the content is, or what it is that we're trying to, the message we're trying to pass across, or whatever it is that we're trying to showcase. I think it really, really depends. For me, I would benefit more from a globalized audience, because I'm reviewing technology, I'm reviewing finance, and even at that, not everyone is using the same piece of tech that the Nigerians are using. In Nigeria, we have the best-selling smartphone in Nigeria. No one has really heard about it in the US. I have to be the one to make content about this smartphone in Nigeria, and talk about it, explain the details, because nobody else will do that. So that way they're not represented. So somebody has to represent them here. So again, it really depends on the kind of story it is, the kind of content it is that we're trying to do, we're trying to make. And it depends on, again, what the thing is, what the feeling is that we want to evoke. But I would say regionalization is very, very, very important, because if it is an underrepresented audience, someone has to address that audience. If not, we're just going to have that huge information gap and all the disadvantages that come with it.
Okay. So Mira, to you, I want to ask, obviously looking at DW, and DW is a leading global media, but at the same time, we know that there's a lot of work that you're doing within the various regions in Africa, as an example. So then how do you bend the global influence with now the specific regional or national specifications? And maybe that could touch on why was it important, as an example, for you to now go granular in terms of things like languages, and what are some of those things that you're doing in specific regions, and how are those now perhaps feeding into now the whole global village that is DW?
I will kind of repeat what I've said earlier already. We are aware that we can not satisfy everyone, and we have to make choices ultimately. There is not this one content that will be interesting for every audience that we have in DW. But yeah, we're trying to obviously get a bit more regional and also expand our regional audiences. In Africa, for example, last year we started like a new, we launched a new TikTok account, the DW News Lagos TikTok account, that also collaborates with content creators from Lagos. And we bring in our correspondents from the office there. So we kind of merged, again, as we said, the content creators with the professional journalism, and try to then address topics that are very local and is interesting for the people over there, but that also have sometimes, you know, they also address global news, for example, but they try to explain it for that audience. Obviously, we are aware, and that's never going to be our goal, that this particular content, this channel will not reach our global audience. It's not going to be interesting necessarily for our audience in Brazil or for our audience in India, and I think that's okay. We have to be, you know, aware that if we, for example, do these kind of collaborations on the ground, it's really to get a different kind of audience and you know, expand into areas regionally to people that we haven't been able to reach so far.
Okay. So earlier on, Fisai, you touched on tech. So obviously, I mean, we're on a tech platform right now. That's why we are able to come in from different parts of the world and have this wonderful conversation. So I just want to understand, maybe starting with you, Fisayo, what is the role of technology and internet in this conversation of regionalization versus globalization?
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. Technology has really played a very profound role when it comes to globalization or like globalizing content. I, for one, I probably won't be speaking to you if not for a tech platform, which is YouTube, where I've been producing my videos on. So a platform like YouTube has helped me. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning of this session, I just have around 30 to 40% of the audience that watch me from where I am from. That's Nigeria. The rest of the 60% are kind of scattered all around the world, from India, the US, the UK, and all those kind of places. So because of tech platforms, it has kind of aided globalization and made, you know, everyone seem very close. We're talking about, even if it's content creation, even if it is payments, even if it is anything, everything seems so close now. And, you know, as something like that has that advantage of pulling people together, you know, there's also the disadvantage of kind of losing yourself in this space. And also, like what you mentioned earlier, in terms of the culture and in terms of the story being diluted. So tech has really enabled us to get closer, but it has advantages and its disadvantages. You're muted.
Amel, how has tech, in your opinion, maybe contributed to regionalization as an example? Because obviously now we know we can plug into, you know, the rest of the world, but now when we come back to, you know, our home ground, how has tech contributed to that?
I think tech has done a lot, and I'll use practical examples. I mean, before social media blew up and all of that, I remember if we needed something to be done between Ghana and Nigeria, maybe I would email Bella Niger, this is something that has happened, or they will email me. But now the platforms have opened up so much that now people would even see it happen on Instagram, and they don't need that connecting those gatekeepers to bring the message. They say it, and if they want to carry it, it goes along. Most of these platforms by themselves are very global because they are built that way, and so it's important for national players to connect and then have that strength on a regional level, so that from the regional level our content, I mean, if something has come and Nigeria is watching, sharing, commenting, Uganda is doing same, before you know, it's traveling and it becomes a global piece of content. So for me, I think especially online, it's the regionalization is very important, because once we have those numbers, once we have that mass, then by nature and algorithms, our content even now starts traveling to sit on the global space.
Okay. Mira, I'm curious, in your opinion, what impact do you think COVID had towards now how we saw the uptake of tech, social media platforms, and really just the contribution towards regionalization and ultimately globalization of content?
I think really the pandemic has accelerated a movement that was already rolling, but I feel also, and I see also the way we work in journalism now is it's different than it was before the pandemic. Like, you know, we've always been saying, oh, this kind of idea of, you know, more new work and everything is more like fluent, flexible, and so on. But we've always had a lot of fear, I would say, to really dive into that and to go everything fully digitalized and so on. And then the pandemic came along and it just forced all of us to just do it, you know, without any preparation. And I think that's how, you know, it has just speed up a lot of things. And I think that's what we will, potentially profit from in the coming few years, that things that we thought would maybe come around 2030 or something, they are already here. And I think we have to kind of catch up with it. But what I like about it is also that previously we always thought that things are going to be complicated, things are not going to work, and there's going to be a lot of, you know, problems around it and so on. And now we've seen that by just doing and trying it out, obviously not everything was perfect. We had to improvise a lot also when it comes to the production of our content. But while doing that, we've also created new formats. We've created like shows that would have never happened before because we thought, they're not good enough, or that doesn't look good enough, or maybe that's not our standards. And because we were forced to do it during the pandemic, we've seen that people actually like it and they were successful, and no one really cared about the things that we thought were important. So I think sometimes it's good to just, you know, jump into the cold water and try out things, and then you see that, for example, the content that we created on the pandemic, now me speaking from the side of a health editor, we created a show basically in the brink of an eye focused on COVID information. And it was one of the most successful shows that DW has ever produced in the last few years. And it was very, very relevant for a lot of different countries, and a lot of different broadcasters worldwide took up that program because they were interested in the program. And that's where we saw how things can, you know, come together again, ultimately.
Okay, so they say all good things come to an end. So I understand our time is almost up. So very quickly, maybe in summary, and I'll throw this to you, Annette. When we are talking about regionalization versus globalization, what do you think the future holds?
The future is bright. The future is bright. I think the stakeholders just have to prioritize, get to know what is it in for regionalization. What does Uganda need? What does East Africa need? I heard her say that, of course, DW cannot do everything, but you have to find a way of prioritizing, because you also have to understand that there are so many audiences, there are so many numbers back at home. When you look at Uganda, it's one of those countries with the biggest number of youths, which means these are people who are very familiar with technology, familiar with who are a bit exposed, unlike the figures of the old who are 50s and above. So I think we need to consider, the stakeholders need to consider both regionalization and globalization, but take it easy, because at the end of the day, we don't want that global effect to eat up our culture, and also our has too much to give that the rest of the world would like to see.
Well, thank you for that, Annette, and thank you to all the panelists. I believe our time is up. And again, thank you for everyone who's participating and wherever it is you're joining us from. I really do hope that we earn the privilege of your time. Over to you, Shana.